Hey everybody, it's Norm from Tested, and I am actually working out of Adam's shop today. While we're filming this, Adam is on the road and has graciously let us use his shop and his tools for some projects. And I have a diorama project that I'll be doing today featuring the Mandalorian and Bo-Katan from the Mandalorian. As you're watching this, I think Mandalorian Season 3 is going on right now. I think first episode is aired as I'm filming this. I don't know what's happening, but it's certainly sparking a lot of imagination. And what just arrived for me is this Bo-Katan 1/6 scale figure from Hot Toys, which is of course the likeness of Katie Sackhoff and the Death Watch armor. And it comes with a flight stand. So a lot of these figures have a display stand. This one has a really nice flexible and a rigid one that allows you to pose a character in flight. And she has a jetpack as well. And look at this, and it's really nice, but I think it needs to be elevated. It needs to be higher. I think there's a shot in Mando 3, the trailer for Mando Season 3, where you see Mandalorians descending from jetpacks, jumping out of some ship or something. I want that. I want the idea, the look of Bo-Katan descending and like firing her blasters away much higher than this is off the ground. So I sketched up what I think could work as a diorama. These display stands, these flight stands, I have an extra one here, can be mounted from the base, or they could also, some people have mounted them upside down. And then you clamp the waist clip around the figures. So I think we can do that. I have the right bits for this to screw into a sheet of plywood. And so I'm gonna cut out some sheets of plywood. I did some preparation at home, laser cutting some acrylic. So we're gonna sandwich some plywood in some acrylic. And I bought online these brass rods. These are 3 feet each, 3/8 inch in diameter. And we're gonna build a display stand to have Bo-Katan descending. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's cut our plywood to size and do some test fits. Let me talk you through the concept that I sketched up here. I start off knowing that I would need some kind of base, something for the display stand to screw into. It's gonna be plywood, and so it was about measuring, first coming what shape that would be and the size of it. I started thinking maybe a circle, but ended up thinking, you know, Star Wars. Let's go with a hexagon, right? So a hexagon shape, and I roughly sketched out maybe 8 inches wide. Doesn't need to be 12 inches. I want people to cut multiple sheets of the matching acrylic on my Glowforge laser cutter. So a hexagon, 8 inches or so in total diameter. And then I knew I would also be able to buy these long, 3 feet long brass rods. And they come in packs of 3. So I figure 3 might be enough to kind of hold up the plywood. So I have a base of plywood, a top piece of plywood. They'll have holes drilled in to lock in the brass rods. And then it's a matter of coming up with where those holes are. So I'm thinking arrangement of 3 brass rods. Also realize I have some LED lights, so maybe some holes for some LED spotlights, and of course a hole in the center for this flight stand. So I have, in this stack, I have a base sheet of acrylic. On top of that will sit this cut piece of plywood, which we'll need to drill some holes into. On top of that, another sheet of acrylic already with where I've designed the holes for the brass, as well as that flight stand. We have our 3 rods, then a matching piece of acrylic, plywood, and then on top of that, sandwiching an acrylic lid of sorts with some space I've left in so that we can also get some wiring in there for some lighting and electronics. So our next step is to drill our holes for the brass rods and the flight stand. Okay, so I'm gonna mark out on my plywood now where I need these holes to be. And that's for 1 piece of brass, back one, and right here for the flight stand. We're gonna use Forstner bits to cut out the holes for the brass. I'm not gonna cut them all the way through because I cut them halfway. I can use a piece of the ply to actually sandwich the tube in. And they're 3/8 inch, so here's a 3/8 inch Forstner bit. So let's do those first. Let's do some test fits. Wonderful. A little bit of flex. Fantastic. All right, now a real test fit. With every project, it comes in multiple phases, right? There's the phase where enters your head as an idea, and you think about it. You know, maybe you think about it, daydream about it. You go to night to bed, and it's coming together in your head, and it has a certain shape, and it has a certain payoff. Like you can see the end product, and you're piecing together the steps to get there. That's like the first phase. Then the second phase is putting it down on paper. And that's answering the questions that you didn't know you'd have to answer when putting it together. Dimensions, the shapes, all the individual components that will have to be made for a project. That's the second phase. Maybe completely different. Most times, completely different than the first phase. But it's never until it actually gets put together in a physical form that enters another phase where most likely very different than how I had it in my head, how you may have had it in your head, or how it was written down on paper. And I love that. I love the transformation of an idea and how it iterates, new problems, new things to solve. And in a physical form, I'm starting to see, well, did this maybe need to be bigger? Did this platform need to be bigger? Am I gonna have space? Is this too tall? None of those questions could be answered when it was just in my head or when it was on paper. It needed to be put together first. And that's where we're at. And what those holes are for some LED spotlights. So I have my trusty, these are X-King brand LED spotlights. The same little tiny LED lamps that Adam used in his spacesuit helmet as front lamps, but they're great display lights. And so those will get mounted here with the power. Oh, it needs to be a bigger hole. Power routed through just that hole. Okay, just needs to be a bigger hole. No worries. Not as clean as your Forstner bits, but much faster. Yes. We'll go through here. And then we mount that right here. Cool. That works well. Nice, nice, nice. All right. We're getting close. Let's start putting the bonding the acrylic sheets with the plywood, but I'm gonna not tear off this part because it's gloss black and I want to get it dirty, but the other sheets I can start assembling. These have a glossy bottom for the reflection, but I don't want to peel that off. I don't want to get any dust on it. It's one of the last steps. And I also cut out some trim that I already adhered some 3M adhesive, and that will wrap around and give it a little bit more dimensionality, like so. So we got our base, we got our top here with our spotlights. I think it's time to start press fitting these together and sandwiching the brass rods. Now, of course, this is a brass finish, right? And I don't want to paint it, so I don't want just this finish. So something I thought I could try is using some shrink wrap tubing and just wrapping it in black shrink wrap to hide it and make it hopefully an easy way to get this not just the brass color. Great. Left a little bit on each end, and let's apply some heat. It's gonna take a while. Fitment is okay. I can see there's a little bit of flex here, but I think I can tighten that up with maybe the equivalent of washers or something to press against the acrylic here. Oh, there goes the back one. Now, there is a difference between these front two pieces and this back piece of brass. These front two are locked in by the top and bottom pieces of plywood. The back, there's a hole that goes all the way through. And that's because I thought it'd be possible, and I'm pretty sure it's possible, that I can get this through the brass and out the bottom to go into the power outlet. So let's try it. The rods are not perfectly secure right now. I know that, and I got to come up with a solution for it. But at this point, the heat shrink solution works. A little bit of just burnt shrink tubing, that's okay. I can live with that. Covers up the brass nicely. The top and bottom fit together. Mostly balances. We'll see how load-bearing it is next. Spotlights are wired through this brass tube, and so we can power those up as well. And I can also adhere on my top cover piece, which is the last acrylic piece for now. So let's get the display stands screwed in, pose some figures, and see where we're at least with the proportions of the whole thing. And now we've come to the fourth phase of a project, from idea to paper to putting it together to seeing the end of the tunnel, seeing what the finished product could potentially look like. And it's this alchemy of ingredients with lighting, from the subject matter, from it being so close to being done. This is when a project gets really exciting. Of course, this isn't done yet. There's more problem solving to do to make sure these rods are secure, but I think proportionally, this is looking great. I love that there's a good amount of distance between the two characters. And yes, I think the next step is to figure out how we light up their blasters. Okay, so I've taken the project back home now, and we're gonna wrap up the rest of this video in time lapse, because really it's a lot of soldering different kinds of LED lights to finish off the electronics. I'm starting off here with some micro LEDs because I want to add some lights to Bo-Katan's headband, which is pretty prominently lit up in every shot she's in this season of The Mandalorian. Extending the existing wires using magnetic wire, and so what I'm doing is boiling away the enamel at the ends of the magnetic wire to reveal the wire that I can then solder and use it to attach to the LEDs and wire them around Bo-Katan's head. I'm trying not to do any permanent installation on this head sculpt here, so I'm not going to be using glue, but I can cut up small pieces of 3M adhesive and carefully tuck them in between her head sculpt as well as the headband, and then place those micro LEDs in place, wiring then around her hair sculpt behind the head, and then creating some strain relief with a little bit of gaff tape, again, tucked behind that head sculpt. These micro LEDs run off of 3 volts and are plenty bright, and just as bright are the LED filament wire that I'm using for the blaster bolts. And this is a really fun part of the project. So I'm trying to create the illusion that the blaster bolts are already fired away from the blaster barrel, so I'm extending them with a little bit of brass wire, and then also, once again, using magnetic wire, very thin, high gauge, to hide them as best as possible. I'm trying to create them at different lengths using a warm blaster bolt for Bo-Katan's blaster and red one for Mando. So at this point, the project is basically complete. I gotta do a little bit of final assembly, sturdy up those rods, and then we're gonna take our beauty shots and photos. And yes, I know, now having seen most of Mandalorian Season 3, Bo-Katan does not fight the Mandalorian in this scene, so consider this a little bit of fan fiction and a fun diorama project that I had a really fun time building. I hope you enjoyed it as well. Thank you so much for watching. Enjoy the beauty shots, enjoy the photos, and I will see you next time.